is one of the pillars of the Defense Department's Zero Trust strategy. At TechNet Cyber, I asked Bryan Rosensteel, U.S. Federal Chief Technology Officer at Ping Identity, what agencies are doing well and what they're struggling with around identity management.
You know, one of the things that I'll say the agencies are getting better at is understanding what identity actually is. So a lot of times, wind the clock back even a few years ago, and when we talked identity, people would think identity, they would equate it to like, oh, my driver's license or my PIV or my CAC, right, that actual credential. And now people really understand we have to look at identity from the true definition, right? So identity being tools, processes, systems, to enabling the right person to access the right resource at the right time for the right reason, etc. And that really expands identity beyond simply who's that person behind the keyboard to everything that is involved from a digital identity perspective. What are they coming in from? How are they interacting with the system? What are they interacting with? What are they allowed to do? Such that that person's identity can change even while they're interacting within the system itself. And that very much fits into this whole kind of zero trust mindset and best practices about let's put processes in place to understand that digital identity and then put our access management capabilities around those types of best practices and thought processes. So we're getting better at retraining the way that culturally we view identity, and then of course that leads into better practices of how we're going to approach the security.
It sounds like for a long time agencies have been doing identity as a tactical thing, a CAC card, a PIV card or whatever, and you're talking about it more like a concept. That people should think about it conceptually rather than tactically. Is that fair?
No, absolutely. Yeah, and we're changing identity too from, so to say what you say, from that tactical of, I've got just a piece of information, that information is contained on that card as an authenticator, and I'm going to use that to gain access, and then I know who's in the system. That is changing to authentication's merely the enabler of authorization. Authorization is what we really want to get at. Okay, we're going to have confidence, we're going to trust but verify who is the individual coming to the system, but now it's all about, okay, you are who you claim to be, and we verified that in authentication, but what do we know about you, and what should you be doing at this particular moment in time? That's what the actual laser focus is on. It's all around attribute-based access control. It's all about the different levels where ABAC is actually enforced, whether that level is going to be between the user and the application, we call it inbound, whether that's going to be between the application and the actual data and resources, we call that outbound ABAC. That's down at the API level. So we're talking about getting really granular down into the weeds of this. The nice part about this is it allows us, once you have that foundation, now you can start expanding that out to beyond just your internal agency, but also to think of coalition partners, right? Think of our Five Eyes community. We cannot rely upon everyone having a CAC card because there are people who have to have access to the systems who simply don't have one. So how do we approach that? Well, we're going to approach it through these more dynamic and robust authorization protocols and schemas.
How does that inform the way that organizations should build systems, architecture-wise? Right. And does it inform the way that they should acquire them through the acquisition process?
Well, like I'm not sales, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, well, they should buy this or buy that. But what it does do, it shifts the focus. When we know that for Zero Trust, they always say it's a journey. Well, I always say you're not just wandering through a forest and smacking your head off trees. You know where you're trying to get. And so, again, it's this authorization, focus that we're trying to get to. To get there, we have to have things laid down. So you hear a lot about centralization through like federation and things like that, setting up the components. But it's also about the data. And it's a lot of, I don't have the time to go into it, but it's a big culture shift. The application owners can't be seen as, I own all the data in my application, but instead, organizations own that data, and now we have to do proper tagging, we have to have proper understanding, and from that we can build the access controls into it. That is, going back to the procurement piece, but refocusing the government on what they need to enhance and extend their existing investments they've already made to shore up those components before they start really doing the interconnected and interoperability components of those solution sets And that's what Zero Trust is all about. Again, not rip and replace, but enhance and extend what we've been building for the last several decades.
Less than a minute left. What are the organizations that are doing this well doing? Are there common threads among what the successful organizations are doing?
Yeah, so organizations have come about this really in two different facets. One, taking authentication away from the application directly and standardizing the way that they're doing a connection over federation. That's super critical. Telling your applications, these are the ways that you're going to identify individuals, and not to get technical, that gets down into naming context within the federation standards. Then the other part about it is understanding ultimately, I'm not trying to protect the identity, I'm trying to protect the data and the resource. Sometimes you're trying to protect identity in the government too, but that means I got to have a better understanding of my data, where my data resides, who is accessing that data, and start tagging that data. Honestly, that's the hardest piece of this. The identity components, that exist. We have that out of the box in those integrations, but it's only as good as your data tagging and structure allows.
Bryan, it's great to talk to you again. Thanks very much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.